everybody, and welcome to Sparing Partners. I'm Monica Paolini at Sensafili, and I'm your host. My guest today is Andy Tiller, who is the AVP of Products and Services at the TM Forum. And the TM Forum does very many things, and Andy will tell us about it. But today, we are going to talk about APIs, and more specifically, the APIs from the TM Forum and how they relate to other things, to other APIs. And this is really interesting because in the in the last year, we have been talking a lot about network APIs from GSMA initiatives, but the TIP forum APIs have been around for a much longer time, and so it's really interesting to look into how they work. They have a different function, but they're still APIs, but work for different things. So it's really interesting to put them in the context together, because that improves our understanding of APIs and also understanding of how wide and how important APIs are in running service providers, operations, and so on and so forth. So Andy, welcome to Sparing Partners. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Monica. It's nice to be here as well.
And Andy, and I've known you for a long time. Where before TM Forum, before APIs. Well, I wouldn't say before APIs were a thing, because they've been a thing for forever. Before they were used in this way in telecoms. Anyway, so why don't you tell us what is that you do at the TM Forum and how you got there?
Okay, so my current role at TM Forum, effectively it's product management for our open digital architecture, which I guess we'll come on to discuss a bit more later. But I began my career in telecoms after a start as a chemist, a theoretical chemist, in fact. But I began my career in telecoms in 1998 with a company called Geneva Technology, which those of us who are quite old like us will remember as a very successful billing software company based in Cambridge in the UK. That was acquired by Convergys, in turn by Netcracker. So I worked there. I also then did a startup in London called Showzoo, which was Instagram, but about 5 years too early. I joined IP Access and worked in small cells for 3G and 4G radio access networks. And then back to BSS with Chinese software company Asia Info for a few years before joining TM Forum about 8 years ago now. So I've been in various roles in TM Forum. I've run the collaboration programs, the Catalyst proof of concept projects, our training and conformance certification business. So done a number of things.
Absolutely. It's it's a lot to realize that you've been at the TM Forum for that long, but that's just me slow to catch up on things. Okay, so I have to confess that the first time I came across the TM Forum, like, what is that they do? I just couldn't, I think that actually your messaging, it's because now you have excellent material. I have to say this is like on a lot of topics, excellent reports and everything. But at the beginning, I was like, what is that they're really trying to do? And now it's much clearer. But in this vein, can you tell us a little bit about the APIs, and then we can move to the wider the wider efforts. So what are the
I mean, TM Forum is a little bit like the elephant with lots of blind men feeling different parts of it. So to some people, it's the big event we run in Copenhagen now, used to be in Nice every year. To other people, it's our collaboration work where we develop the standards and frameworks. And to others, it's our events, our research, lots of different things that TM Forum do. But at the heart of it all, we are helping the industry to collaborate to develop standards, frameworks, best practices in the IT part of the industry, or at least that's where traditionally we've been with the CIO domain. And we've never really been until recently in the network side of the business. But that's all changing as the network becomes software, and in particular as network operations now begins to be something which is done by machines using AI and intent-based automation. So TM Forum has big programs in that area. So we're finding ourselves connected to the network side of the business much more. And that's also true in our API work, because the APIs that TM Forum has developed over many years, more than 10 years now, traditionally have been in the OSS and BSS world, where we've been using the APIs to simplify the integration between OSS and BSS applications, but also to expose IT capabilities externally to enterprises and to ecosystem partners. So they're not only used internally, they're also used externally. But this we find is very complementary to the work that GSMA is now doing with Open Gateway. And I guess we'll dive into that in some more detail. But so we are working very closely with GSMA. Open Gateway, as I'm sure everybody listening will know, is about monetizing the network through APIs, exposing the network capabilities to developer communities through various marketplaces and channels. And TM Forum is working together with GSMA. We are creating what is called the Operate APIs. And there's a Linux Foundation project called Camara, which is developing what's called the Service APIs. And the Service APIs are the ones which are used by developers, for example, to query location or to request quality on demand, those kinds of things. All the Camara APIs can do that. But the TM Forum Operate APIs, they essentially turn these APIs into products which the operators can monetize through the marketplaces. So onboarding, usage management, catalog capabilities, and so on. So, and then at the back end, TM Forum APIs will typically be completing the orders and the configurations and so on that are passed through to the operator from the Camara APIs through the marketplaces.
Yeah. So before I forget, the meeting in Copenhagen this year was my first year I attended, and it's really a beautiful event because it's really like it has the right mix of social interaction and technical, where you learn things, but you also have an opportunity to catch up with people. It's just beautifully done. Anyway, that's kind of my so it's really interesting because, like you said, the difference. And one way I look at it is that the network APIs can be a monetization opportunity in of its own, in the sense that you sell the API to the app developer. Your APIs provide what I call the indirect monetization, in the sense that make the whole thing more efficient, make it easier, better to sell the same product. So you don't sell the API, but the API allows you to make more revenues. Is that a fair characterization?
That's right. I mean, the commercial models and monetization is beginning to happen in the market using the Open Gateway APIs. We're beginning to see that around the world for particular applications. But we're moving towards developing the true global scale, and that's yet to really mature, I think. But because of course you can expose Camara Open APIs direct from one operator to one big enterprise customer. Typically, it might be a bank, for example, which is looking to use APIs to make authentication seamless for its end customers. But that just works for one bank's customers on one operator's network if they happen to be using a mobile phone on that network. So you then need to scale it up to say, well, how do we make that work for all of the banks and on all of the networks? Initially in one country, for example. So this is happening in Brazil right now, but then also in China. But then globally, how are we going to scale it up globally so that it doesn't matter what network the end customer is on, that those services that are accessible through the Camara APIs, so for example, quality on demand, is available everywhere. That's something that takes a while to build. And what I'm seeing in the market is that momentum is really gathering. We've had lots of initiatives around open APIs in the past that haven't really succeeded. They've run out of steam. Open Gateway hasn't run out of steam. It's still building, and so I think this is something quite encouraging. There's a lot of analysts are saying, are predicting very good things. There's a lot of analysts perhaps more skeptical about whether it can really work financially for the operators and really move the needle. But I think we're certainly in a time where open APIs are showing a lot of promise for helping to reignite growth in the industry.
Now, with the network APIs, you do need to have standardization, because unless every operator has the same API, it's kind of, you have fragmentation and the value of the API is diminished. But with your APIs, and this is like a devil's advocate question, couldn't every operator just develop their own APIs and, because it's something that is specific to what they do?
Right. So yeah, this is often misunderstood. The TM Forum open APIs are generic by design, which means, let's suppose you're using the order management API, you can order an iPhone and a data plan, you can order a very complex enterprise broadband connection, you can order a pizza. And it's deliberately made flexible so that any operator can define their own product and service offerings and use the same API. But that means they may be using different product and service models from another operator, which is using TM Forum APIs internally. Now, when you go to external integration and you're trying to standardize inter-operator APIs, you have to lock down the product model and the service model and agree so that you're all buying and selling the same thing. So this is where Kamara comes in for the developer community. It's where, for example, also our relationship with MEF comes in for their NAS service domain, where through their APIs, operators are buying and selling wholesale retail with each other. In these situations, you need to create a very specific agreement on what payload the API is carrying. So that's where we work closely with partners like GSMA and with MEF. And it's essentially their APIs that are exposed to the marketplace. We keep, those APIs are often based on TM Forum open APIs, so we provide the generic underlying standard, which is flexible for operators when they're defining their own products and services, but is also usable, the design patterns and so on, to make a truly standard interoperable API for interworking between different partners in an ecosystem.
Absolutely. So yeah, so there is a sense in which they can do their own, but it's so much better to just, to just use something that everybody in the industry, and it's also best practice. It also manager reduces their costs. And so if you look at your website, you have many of them, and they're generic, but some that are more specific, and so it's like it's kind of a menu based, so you just pick and choose what you need. And I guess it really makes sense when you think about the network as a software digitalized beasts that has many different parts, and you have to put them together, and you have to find what is that you need. You're not constrained by a simple architecture or a structure that everybody has. You just pick and choose what you need, which I guess is part of your ODA platform, right?
That's right. I mean, APIs are a funny thing. One is useless, 10,000 is useless, but 100 is probably about the right number. So we've published over 100 REST-based open APIs. Many of them are now available in asynchronous versions as well to support event-based architectures, which are becoming prevalent. And as you say, they're part of the open digital architecture. So ODA itself is a blueprint essentially for designing, building, and operating a cloud-native telco. It's the software architecture for a cloud-native telco. And so there are lots of bits of it. The APIs are an important part of the implementation architecture. And they go together with the concept of the ODA components. And these are the actual software applications. So it could be a product catalog, could be resource inventory management system. And the granularity of those components has been defined by our ODA collaboration project. So all of the TM Forum standards and frameworks are defined by our members working together in our collaboration programs. It's not a sort of cabal of TM Forum staff creating standards for the industry. It's collaborative work. And so there's a map of 60 or so ODA components, which are the software building blocks of this cloud native architecture. The concept is that these components, they talk to each other through the open APIs, and you deploy them into a standardized operating environment we call the ODA canvas, which means that these applications are much more portable. You don't need to customize them for every different context, every different, from a software vendor's point of view, from every different customer you take it to. You can deploy it in a standardized cloud environment. So that's the basic idea with ODA. It's fundamentally dependent on the open APIs at its heart. And it provides a way for the operators to develop a standardized software model for the whole IT estate. Increasingly, though, as the network becomes software, the way that you operate and manage cloud native network functions compared to how you'd operate and manage BSS applications, why should it really be any different? The management of those software applications on a cloud environment, all of the site reliability engineering and so on, scaling things up and down, upgrading components. These are all common. It's just generic for, there's nothing specific to BSS there. So we're beginning to see this concept expanding beyond the traditional IT world that we've always worked in, to begin to look at deployment of cloud native network functions as well.
Yeah. So how does it relate to the next stage, which is the path to autonomous networks? It just seems like that's kind of like the sort of I don't want to sound restricted here, but it's kind of almost like the plumbing, the kind of the basis that will help you take you there. Is that right?
Yes. Well, so the first thing is autonomous networks. Essentially, the concept is straightforward. You get the machines to optimize the network, to heal the network if it breaks, and so on. So the network can be self-driving. And TM Forum's had a program to look at autonomous networks for many years already, and has developed a whole load of APIs and frameworks and reference architectures for the implementation of intent-based closed-loop automation for a whole range of different network operations functions. So this project is interesting because, of course, at a certain point you introduce AI. AI itself is software applications which need to be managed in a similar way to other software. So that management and operations of software is a core TM Forum competence. So we have a lot of tools and frameworks that can be used to help with the proper governance and management of AI. But then as you start to apply it to the operations of the network, you really go deep into the network domains, which is somewhere we've only recently started to go because of this AI-based automation coming in. So we have a while ago created a very simple model for autonomous network levels. So from 0 to 5, conceptually 0 is where everything is manual. Level 5 is where the network just runs itself. You don't even need humans to create intent anymore. The network, the AI will decide what's good for the customers and for the network, and it can work by itself. So essentially level 5 is a rather theoretical concept at this point, but a lot of operators are working towards level 4. And level 4 is where within specific network domains, you introduce full automation. So it could be, for instance, fault management on the radio access network. It could be optimization of the IP network, and so on. So there are dozens of these scenarios where you might want to fully automate the network operations. And so we're working three different parts of this whole problem space. The first one is to do with, well, how do you know where you are? You know, what's the objective measure of automation in your network? So we've created autonomous network levels evaluation tools, which would provide a standardized way to measure, you know, what level you're at. And we've worked with a lot of operators in our collaboration projects that are looking at these specific scenarios and coming out on average at about 2.5 for different aspects. So quite a long way to go to level 4, but the more advanced operators are up in the 3s, and some for very specific scenarios are claiming to have got to level 4 already. So that's all good, and the industry is looking at trying to get to level 4. But there's an open question, really. So why do you want to be level 4? What's the value of being level 4? Can you quantify it? If you make an investment in automating network operations, is level 4 going to pay back? If you've you know, got the machines to do all the work, you're still having to pay for the machines to do the work. AI can be quite expensive. So we've got another set of activities looking at how do you measure that? What are the key effectiveness indicators you use to determine whether there's a business case for a particular scenario to get it to level 4? And then once you've decided it's worthwhile, you then have to figure out how to do it. And so there's a lot of work we have around the development of the architecture for implementing level 4 automation, creating a standardized way for autonomous network domains to negotiate intent between each other. And again, this is all dependent on our open APIs. We have the APIs that are specifically able to negotiate intent. We have a design pattern for embedding intent within the existing APIs as well. So all of this is very exciting, evolving space, and a lot of operators getting very excited about achieving level 4 automation and getting a lot of customer experience benefits and cost saving as a result.
Yeah, no, this is quite interesting, and you know, sort of the higher picture, bigger picture framework. Now let's go a little bit further down. One way that I think about APIs in general is that they're basically in the new, conceptually, they're a new way to think about interfaces. In the sense that when you had, you know, your 3GPP network, you just have different elements and interfaces, and everything is kind of like pretty much equipment driven at one level or another. And so you need a clear interface between point A and point B. Now, APIs in a digital kind of environment where you have multiple things, and they're all software based and whatever, but they still need to talk to each other. So you don't have a piece of equipment, A and B, it's much more undetermined, but is it a good way to think about it as kind of like the new interface conceptually? Is that?
Yes, it is. So I mean, the network world and the IT world have thought about these things quite differently traditionally. So in the network world, 3GPP will define the functions of the different parts of the network, different elements of the network, and the interfaces. And you know, that used to be all very specialized hardware and run by very specialized software. But those interfaces were locked down very, very tightly so that you had a global standard, and you know, you could interoperate different networks, and that was very, very important, very high value, lots of essential IPR in there, so that if you could get your, you know, if you're a big company, you got your IPR into the standards, then people would have to pay you for using the standards, which is you know, an interesting concept. But that's how the network world has always worked. The IT world has been very different, and I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is that on the IT and the business side, every operator needs the ability to differentiate, to come up with its own product and service offerings, and not be constrained by the standard. So the standards have been more general, and that's why our APIs are very generic. So you can define your own product and service. Whereas with the network API, if you start to go off piste away from the standard, you know, that's locked down, or put a different payload onto the interface, you're going to end up not interoperable, and that will cut you out of the whole global network. So these have been very different concepts, really, and now I think we are seeing, you know, that as these two worlds come together, the network becomes software, as the conceptually, it's just exactly the same way of working. You've got applications that are communicating with each other through API interfaces. These different approaches are being reconciled. I think there are, wherever you have interoperability requirements, you're going to have a hard standard. You're going to have to lock down the payloads, the product models, the service models, the resource models. And as you do that, you do put constraints on. You say, well, if you want to interoperate, you've got to agree some things. You're not going to depart. You're not going to try and differentiate yourself by doing something different from all of your peers. So in TM Forum's APIs, we have this concept called domain context specialization, which is a way of taking the generic API, which can do anything, and locking onto it a very specific payload that makes a hard interoperability standard. So everybody agrees the product and service definitions, and the data model is locked into place. And then the TM Forum API, it can be used for this interoperability, these hard interoperability requirements.
Yeah, so this is really, I find it really interesting because that sort of calls into question our model of standardization. What is a standard? So you have the 3GPP kind of model. It used to be all there was to it. And now you have more about it. And you could say, well, the 3GPP is still necessary, obviously, I'm not saying it, but it seems like it's much more rigid, and you probably need it for some of the kind of standardization efforts there. But there is also this increasing part where it's standardized, but you need to have more flexibility. As I say, you might have, there is more of an agreement process. It's more similar to the open source type of components. You pick and choose what you need, but you want to share, but you also need to change whatever you need. So does it mean that the 3GPP model is becoming a little bit outdated, and that might be in need of a change, or is just...
I wouldn't say so. No, I mean, I think we're always going to need those network standards to standardize the network architecture and the interfaces on the network so that it will work globally. I mean, the heart of our industry is based on these real hard standards, so that you can use your mobile phone all over the world, and we don't have different. You don't need different equipment and different implementations in different parts of the world for the network. So that's something that is fundamental to our industry, I think. Where it becomes more, you then need to layer on top of that room for differentiation as you go towards products and services offered by competing companies in the market. There's a point at which the collaboration stops and the competition begins. And that's always been somewhere in the business world, in the IT world and the business world. I mean, back in the olden days, you and I will remember BT introducing Friends and Family as a differentiated billing offer, which their competitors couldn't match, and there were equivalent things in other parts of the world as well. And I think you could argue that over time, some of that went a bit too far. So we added a huge amount of complexity in the IT world, which wasn't really paying back. That differentiation from making really complex billing tariffs or offers turned out to cost a lot in terms of the customization that had to be maintained. So there's been a bit of a trend in the IT world back away from making things over complex to simplifying the way that products and services are created. We still do need very different approaches for different markets. So, for example, when I was working in China, if you were ordering your mobile phone service, the first step in the process would be to choose a lucky number. which if you're doing that in America, that wouldn't be nowhere in the process. So you need this flexibility to respond to different, different customer requirements, different market needs, but within the scope of a standardized approach, a blueprint that allows for that without creating too much complexity. And this is what ODA really, the Open Digital Architecture, this is what we're really trying to achieve with that. Sufficient standardization to create the simplicity, enable modernization of the software architecture, and support automation in a fairly standardized way, but without creating a straitjacket for our members, whether they are on the vendor side trying to differentiate their commercial software products or the operator side trying to differentiate their service offerings into the market.
And let me ask you a final question. You have, as you said, quite a few APIs. And you've been used for a long time, and you have quite a good volume. Can you tell us what are the most successful ones?
I think top of the list is the account management one. So as you can see, a very generic one. But I mean, they're all popular. We have so 68 of them are fully mature with a full set of assets so that you can do conformance certification against those. Almost all of them have been certified not only in software products in the lab, but also in real-world deployments. So we have what we call real-world conformance certification, where an operator will come and certify the APIs that they're really using in practice. Lots of big operators have done that with us. Sometimes they do it together with their software vendors, and they'll say, right, as part of the criteria for this project, at the end of the project, we're going to do the certification of all the API implementations that have been done. And so the APIs are being used widely across the whole estate. One of the interesting things is that there are a lot of companies using our open APIs, downloading them. We have, by the time this goes out, we'll have had 1 million downloads of our open APIs by more than 3,000 different companies. And only 800 of those are TM Forum members. So we're not even sure quite what the rest of the world is doing with our open APIs, but they certainly are being downloaded very widely and are used externally. We found companies like Vodafone are saying that when they go into negotiations with big enterprise customers, their enterprise customers are looking for API interfaces, standardized API interfaces. So whereas they used to, for example, offer a complex customized enterprise portal, a web interface for the telco people on the enterprise side to manage their, order new products and configure their network. Now those customers just want an API interface so they can create their own front end on that. Interestingly, maybe in the future, the front end just goes away and it's all AI controlled, and you just explain your intent to a voice recognition system and it does it for you. So the APIs are becoming the front end to these things, and so they're being used not just by our operator customers to integrate their own OSS and BSS, but also to expose those capabilities to configure and manage network services to their enterprise customers.
So is there any API that is kind of like surprising when you say, oh, I can't believe that everybody's downloading that one? Okay, because the account manager is like, well, okay, I understand. Everybody needs to do that, but it's just weird.
I don't think, I mean, the way that our collaboration programs work, the priorities are set by the companies that are working to develop the APIs. So, our members come into the program and they say, right, I need an API for this. So let's develop it together. Anyone else need this as well? And so, there aren't really many off-the-wall APIs that only one company is interested in, because that probably wouldn't get the priority. We do find that one of the important ways that our work happens is that we have what we call our Catalyst program, which is where members develop a proof of concept for something very innovative. And so they will try to use all of the existing TM Forum frameworks and standards to build what they want to show. And And they will sometimes find gaps. And so they will say, right, we need an API that doesn't exist. So they build one, contribute it into the API project, which then may choose to adopt it or modify it. So whereas in the olden days, standards work was about sitting in a dark room and coming up with a theoretical standard and then putting it out to the world and forcing people to use it. Now it's much more dynamic, and the development of the APIs is done practically first very often, and then it's standardized later as the technology is proven.
Absolutely. So it's a sort of a back and forth, more interactive process. Well, Andy, thank you so much. It was really great information, great view of the API world you gave us today.
Thank you very much, Monica. It's a pleasure to be here today.
And thank you all for listening in, and do subscribe to the podcast, Sparing Partners, on your favorite platform if you liked it as well. Thank you so much.